Evan, do you want to go to the YouTube channel and see if
Yeah.
it starts working? Should be a delay, so it should be fine. So it takes a couple seconds, it take 30 seconds or so, and it should pop up. It should say live.
There we go.
Yeah, so if you go into there, what's that look like? Do
I
you
think we're good.
have your volume on? Make sure there's. Can you hear anything happening? There we go. Sweet. All right.
Awesome. Business.
All right. So, what did you guys do yesterday? Review stuff?
Yeah, he taught some new things.
We
You showed us the gem.
Yeah.
He showed you the gem, okay.
He went through how that works.
Okay.
He did. What else? Yeah, he reviewed some of those database using Active Record and whatever.
Okay.
Not Postman, but the other one.
Insomnia.
He's on the edit shows
To show us.
manipulating the database with the routes and stuff.
Okay. Yeah, so like Postman. Yep, great. Okay, so we're going to talk about connecting the JavaScript side to the backend side today. So I'm just going to get with some code that's already been written that you guys will be able to use. To do this, let's see. So, these examples. Go from there. And then, so we can start up our Rails app. Exec Rails S, which you guys look like you've been playing with a little bit. And then I can go open up our JavaScript app. So hello world JavaScript app. And I missed the most important piece from that other.
Yes, my computer will die.
Oh, it has to be on
As a
It just like turns off. It's not like
Yeah, if you want to go grab another one, dang, you can go.
very unfortunate.
something about Max is in that place battery. Used to be able to.
They're literally no screws. I think it's just like a.
Actually, I don't know about how old
I'm
that
afraid to
is.
pick it up. It's awful lot.
But I think on the new ones you can't. You can't upgrade the memory. Or the SSD.
Quality products.
Starting to get simple enough that we can actually do some things. So now if we want to do these trackers, do this. Alright. Don't know why I don't like this, but it's okay. I'll use that for a minute. Okay, so we're going to use this method that's made available to us from JavaScript called fetch. This comes from, give you guys a little bit of history of how this stuff used to work, right? So back in the day, with the dinosaurs when I started coding, you had a form that you would put onto an HTML page, and that form had an action and a method. And the action was where it was going to go to, so what the URL was that it was going to hit, and the method was a get or a post, and those were the only two options. We talked a little bit about get and post a couple days ago and what those mean in terms of REST. That allowed you to then be able to, the biggest thing there was the post request. So you could post data, you could send the payload of whatever was in the form up to the server. It went in the body along with the request that you were making. The GET request you could always do. So that was like from way back, even before forms on the internet. As soon as the HTTP protocol existed, you could pass query parameters on your URL. So the question mark syntax and then whatever the name of the parameters were equal to value and together. All right, so that existed way back when. We had the form stuff. The next evolution was, okay, can we start to do this in a single page app environment? So can we pretend like we're going to a new web page in our browser, but by having the JavaScript go behind the scenes to do it instead of actually changing the page that the browser is on. So instead of changing what our actual URL is in the URL address, and you can see here this has a bunch of query params for the NAT tickets page, right? It's getting passed across. Instead of having to go here, can I like make the same request from another page and get the data back and then use it behind the scenes? So the XHR protocol, AJAX requests, they're referred to as, was created. The AJAX request allowed you to be able to make a behind the scenes call and pull things down. Now the syntax for that was super clunky. It was, if you go look it up, let me see, it might have actually XHR. Responses. This for like longer term. It doesn't really matter because hopefully you'll never actually have to do this. Here we go. So is it going to show us? Basically, you make this request. It's very clunky. It's very long. It's a lot of code that you have to write. And in the end, you have to check to see if the status that you get back is 4. Why 4? I don't know, because they decided to make it 4. Like, it's a very strange way that everything is set up. So the next step was jQuery, which you guys may have played with a little bit now, created an AJAX request that was much simpler. And this was really the beauty when jQuery came out. Is that it had these AJAX requests where it had taken all that ugly code and it made it very pretty. So if we go look at for like a get, I think this is not going to be the one I want. All right, so much simpler, right? So all you had to do was say $.ajax, the URL, the data, and then when it's a success, it calls a success callback, and you get a data type back. Which means that you could do something like this. You just do $.get, the URL that you wanted to go to, and then you have a callback function for when it's successful. So what do you want to do with the data? So it's much simpler. It says go off and make this request, and then when you get the request back, I want to do something. Now, when you start to get into making these external requests like this, you start to run into timing issues. Okay, so when I make the request, I don't know how long it's going to take for the server to respond. And the way that JavaScript works is it keeps executing the code. It says, hey, I threw the command off. I tried to execute the command. I haven't gotten anything back yet, but I did that one, so I'm going to keep executing any lines that come underneath of this. So you needed some way to be able to call a function when you finally did get that response back, because it could be a millisecond later, it could be 5 minutes later, you don't know how long it's going to take. That's one of the major uses of what are called callback functions, which you see all the time in JavaScript, and that's what's happening here. It's saying when this promise resolves, so after I get a response back from ajax/test.html, then I want to go and run this function. Okay, so we'll run whatever in this function when we get the response back. So that's great, and it's a big move forward. Recently, JavaScript in Enigma 6 has come out with this fetch protocol, which is very similar. Hopefully you guys have looked at this a little bit. It's just that it's native to JavaScript, and so we're going to use it as our example. Again, still relatively straightforward. You fetch, you put in your URL that you're trying to go to, and then you say .then, and that's going to call a function, which is going to be our response.json, which is just the JSON that you got back, the data that you got back from the URL. It does still do this weird thing where when you get a JSON response back, you have to pass it into another callback that then converts it. We're going to make this syntax a little bit nicer using async await eventually, which is a new protocol that makes it so that the code is much more readable. It does essentially the same thing that we're seeing here, and in fact probably compiles to exactly the same thing, but it's a little bit more readable. So we're going to get to that in a minute. To start with, though, we're just going to take this basic example, and we're going to do a fetch request to our server. So what do I need to put in to the URL here if I want to get back all of my boards?
Localhost colon 3000 / boards.
Okay.
/ boards.
Yeah. And so what's that going to do?
It's going to send a GET request to localhost 3000 boards, and then you should get back all the boards.
Yep. So it's on the controller side. What's that? What controller is that going to hit?
Index. Boards,
That's the
controller.
Boards
index,
controller.
Action.
Boards controller and then the index action. Yeah. So I don't have an index action here because I deleted my thing.
You know you're using the.
Oh, but I am, but I'm not. Like I did.
You're not.
Yeah. I wrote that as an example of the syntax, but I didn't
Are
actually.
you using? Did you get this from? Because
Nathaniel
Nathan
did.
it.
Yeah. I did
You're using
not.
the same project.
No, but I can recreate an index action pretty quickly. So we're just going to say render JSON board dot where. Actually, just do board dot all for the moment. Okay. So when we hit the index action, it's going to give us back all of our boards, no matter what we send up with it, right? All right. So how do we know that this is doing a GET request?
That's the default.
That's the default. Okay. If we didn't want to do a GET request, you can see as the second parameter, it shows this in the docs as well, you can pass in a list of options. So here are some of the examples. So the method post is one. So get, post, put, and delete. It's the ones we talked about a couple days ago. Method get is the default, which is why they put the little star there by it. Mode, so cores, no cores, same origin. You shouldn't have to deal with that very much. Cache, so you can say once I make this request and I get back a response, I just want to cache it and I don't want to actually have to make this request again. There's some caching options that are there. You can also do this on your own. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Credentials, shouldn't have to mess with this very much. Headers, this is actually where you normally send your credential information. So this is where you would put your authorization. It's also where you can do things like set the content type to application JSON, saying that what I expect to get back when I make this request is JSON. There are some controllers, APIs that you'll interact with that will give you back the data in either XML, it's called, or JSON, or HTML. And so by specifying the content type, you're saying, I want to get the data back in this format. I'll send it down to you. For the most part, people default to JSON. You don't have to worry about it. Redirect. So there are times when you hit a URL, it sends you to another URL. So it's basically you hit the action in the controller and it says, actually what they really were trying to do is go somewhere else, and so it sends you. So the redirect follow says, go with it. Sometimes you're worried about people trying to hack your stuff and doing that, and so you say, don't follow. I just want to distract them. Refer just tells the server who you are. So I think there's a default that just says client, it just says coming from client computer. You could say like Evan, or you could say full measure, or whatever, just so they know who you are or not. And then body is when we're doing a post or a put request. This is the data of objects that we're sending up to be able to be put into our database. So there's a bunch of methods here. The ones that we're going to interact with the most are going to be method and body. Okay. For now, though, we're just going to do our very simple GET request. So we're going to hit localhost 3000 boards. We're going to get back a response. We're going to get the JSON off of that, and then we're going to convert the return JSON into a string, into an object rather. Right. So if I go hit endpoint, we're going to get the course issues. Even with my course turned on, it's mad about that. So we can get.
You have to do the mode thing from the options that you have to show.
Yeah, we can try to do the mode no course, but
Oh, you think that won't matter?
I don't think it's going to matter because I think this is a server side thing that's complaining. Otherwise, my little thing here should have blocked it. Let's see. Got something. Got an original response back, but this is the options response most likely. If we look at the network. So this is, if we look at the header, get 200 request URL method get. Actually, we might be getting something. Nothing's actually there yet. So we look at our network. Yeah, we're not getting anything back.
It says a syntax error or something.
Yeah, it says there's a syntax error when it tries to get the JSON because but I think if I get rid of that. So in our debugger we do get a response back with nothing essentially. So we don't have any JSON here. We're not getting anything actually back. So let's see. Did he already set that stuff up on the project that he was using?
Yes.
Okay, so I can
In
go.
terms of the gem.
Yeah.
And of course, yeah, I think so.
So we can just pull him down his project. But he didn't push it, so that's not particularly useful. All right, let's see. What's the easiest way to do this?
Did get pushed.
Do you know where he pushed it to, though?
Are you talking about like your gem stuff?
Mm-hmm.
It's in the Rails intro.
Oh, he pushed it to here. I see. So if I pull it down, got it. Yeah. Yeah, we'll spend some time on that, especially next week, because as you guys start to get into the group projects, you're going to have to get good at that.
Brendan's the master. That's a lot.
Good. So, okay. Oh, I went into the console, so. Alright, so we're still getting nothing back, but it also didn't seem like he had the rack cores thing set up. Yeah. So we have it in. So one of the benefits of writing lots of codes, having lots of projects, is once you've done something, you can go back to where you've done it previously and find that, how you did it. It's a lot easier frequently than trying to go find all the documentation, reread everything again. So we'll get rack cores. Install that. Oh, there's also, that might actually be what the issue is. DV. Oh, dang it. All right, so that did our select board. So let's see, maybe we actually got something back here. Nope. All right, so let's move through it. Actually get something. It is not defined.
Somebody commented out that line.
Yeah, I got it. So if we just do response.json, anything? Hey, look, that's a promise. That's what we're looking for. So we might not even have to do the core stuff. Let's see. Unexpected end of input. You guys see anything?
How do you do your?
Didn't I just copy
Yeah.
this?
Right.
Do you want to show them your syntax? How you
Sure.
I mean, I thought I just copied this directly from their example, didn't I? I just hit this.
Professional fetcher.
Yeah, nice. Let's just change this to. Unexpected end of JSON input. So it's.
Do you need one more closing bracket?
I don't think so. I mean, I literally just copied it from there. We don't have any syntax errors that are happening here. It could be.
Does the whole block after the fetch line have to be in curly brackets?
No, so this is the then is getting appended onto here.
Okay.
So it's saying fetch is going to return a promise, and then I'm going to do these other things to it.
Okay.
So, but we
JavaScript treats it like it's like it just ignores all the white space.
let's see.
That's confusing.
Yes.
Which is just it's the dumbest looking thing.
This runs from the AJ.
I mean,
It's very.
So this is still an AJAX request, just
It's
to
still
be
an
clear.
AJAX?
Yep,
Yeah.
it's all they're all AJAX requests, which is just JavaScript making an XHR request to the browser. The difference is that it's just difference in syntax and like where you're pulling it from. So this is just the simplest form because JavaScript wrote this. It's just a wrapper around the XHR protocol. So is the
So if I did mine in Ajax, I don't necessarily have to switch it.
here I'll show you. Where to go? This guy. So we built our own little library here for interacting with the gem in particular. So it has like a query function, and you just pass in the parameters. A find by, you just pass in the parameters. A put, you just pass in your payload. A delete, you just pass in the parameters. A post, you just pass in your parameters. That's it. So then when you want to call it, you just say whatever the name of the model is that you want to hit, dot delete dot whatever, and pass your parameters up, and it just takes care of it. So it's a very simple way of doing things. It's all built on top of the request stuff. We're just trying to show you this so you get familiar with like how to do it from scratch. So let's just try. Oh, I see. It doesn't like because it's different syntax. So there we go. All right, let's try that. And then let's say. So there's our original response. There's data. Oh, it got rejected. That's why. So that's why I had that try catch block that was happening before. If you get an error from the server, then it's going to throw an error, or if there's some other error that's happening here, it's going to throw an error. And so what you can do is a try catch block, which says try to do this set of code. And if it's successful, move on. If it's not, then go into the catch block. And so then here we can get an error, and we can actually see what the problem is. Otherwise, the error can sometimes be kind of hidden, and so you're not sure what it is that is causing you an issue. So if we do that. Oh, we don't get an error. Let's see. Response, we get back status 200, we get back an okay. I really don't understand why you don't. Type as cores, that should be fine. I don't think any of these things should be issues. Redirected false. Headers, there aren't any. He's using the gem though, right? Yeah, but that should pass down.
You override it.
Well, I didn't because then I pulled from his stuff, right? So if we go look, this is just what Nathaniel had yesterday. Double check that. Protect from forgery.
That's for like a post request.
Yeah. Risk control. So you guys were hitting this yesterday though with the API stuff, right? With with Insomnia.
Yeah.
So we should be getting. All right. Well, we can move to using the jQuery version of this. Maybe there's just something weird.
I sent that in Slack. That's the thing I sent is working for me. But also I'm not using the gem, but it should be fine.
Yeah, I mean this is largely what we're doing, but yeah, let's try it. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing.
I'm shoving it into an array that I defined at the top of that code block.
Yeah, you need to let items equal to your array. Yeah.
That's it. Just wanted to send the exact code block.
Yeah, so we're still getting the same. What the heck is going on?
Yeah.
This is really. It also thinks that this is a syntax error, which is very strange.
As Brendan says, I have to quit the browser.
Well, yeah, but I can't. There's like no. I mean, we can do that, but I've never had that be the issue. Well, that can happen though because you get into a bad state, right? Like if you get your code into a bad state, then there's no way back out potentially. But this is not. Yeah, from origin null. Yeah, so it doesn't like. set the modes no cores so we can switch it.
Oh,
The rat cores thing should cover that.
Yeah.
That error.
Yeah. So let's add rat cores. But no, because the thing is, the postman should run into the same issue with that. I could change it.
No, because that error is because Chrome has a policy where they send the options thing.
I know,
before
but
they
that's
update.
that's what this thing right here. That's what that's supposed to suppress.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. I don't know.
But you can give it a
we lost our cast.
Okay, gotcha. Make it.
Be on it. Like, be on
Let's see what's happening. Or not happening. Well,
So
it. That is useful. Balance.
let me go. Let's see what we do for initializer cores. Yeah. All right, so you can use this rat cores middleware, and it's basically saying really anything, but anything and localhost 8100 and localhost 3000. We're going to allow to make a request. You know what it might be? It might be because I'm not really serving this, and I'm doing it in the browser. What was the little server thing that you did, Justin? Didn't you click a button and made it serve to, or maybe Daniel, you did this, where you made the app actually serve as a local host something, like your JavaScript code. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? You were doing something the other day because we had to fix your.
Oh, I was actually serving that with Sinatra. So I just would do the Ruby list, and I forgot where that.
Okay. Because that might be what the issue is.
So like I just had a Ruby file that required Sinatra. Then I would serve it, and then go to localhost. But then I had to navigate to public index or whatever.
Yeah. So let me just try, because we did this in Dev 300 and that wasn't an issue.
Do you have to add anything? We did add something weird to one of our controllers. It was defining unverified requests.
Yeah, the protecting forgery.
No, it wasn't that though. Okay. Let me see.
We did do this at some point in Dev 300, but request. Here you go.
Look at this. The controller.
Oh, handle unverified request. Why did we do that? What you're including the? I think, but it's because we're using the REST controller. Because we're using the REST controller now. I don't think that's a.
Can you send it to me?
So he's doing the URL and then slash and then interpolating the ID into the URL
Mm.
for the delete and whatever the other ones are that need the ID.
Yeah.
Add it to the end.
Mm-hmm. You just have to add the ID to the URL. That's
Cool.
just. Because I know this was working in this format. Let me just do this. Let's just do this.
So like if you were doing if you were trying to do fetch delete, right? Or if you're trying to do a delete, you need to do the path is whatever
Boards.
board slash. Well, let's say you're trying to like delete an item or something, right? Or board, whatever it's gonna be, whatever the path is for that.
Okay.
But you have to put the ID of the one you're trying to delete.
Yeah.
But
In the URL.
you probably aren't like putting the ID on your JavaScript page, so you have to like get it somehow
Right.
that you can use interpolation. It's all that.
This is so weird. Maybe there is something weird happening with my browser. I can try to open up. Let me try to open Safari, because that code I know we used previously in a class. I don't know why this is being like this.
I mean, both the fetch I sent you and then the fetch you wrote initially are like this. Yeah.
No.
Not doing anything fancy.
Safari.
Wow.
Yeah.
It has this great thing where you have to come in here and say show developer tools. Request. Did you see something about disabling?
Above WebRTC.
Hey, there we go. No idea. Okay, so I think everything we were doing was right. I think there's something weird about my browser somehow. I must have a plugin or something that's causing a weird scenario to happen. So let's just go back to the simple version of this. All right, so we could do something like priority 1000, for example. And we should end up.
You did board.all. Oh, actually it worked. Oh, yeah.
So it's saying extra parameters not allowed priority. This is the active record REST gem that we're using, saying, hey, you're trying to ask for something that doesn't exist on this model. Priority is on item, not on board, so that's why we can't get that to work. Name is on board, though. I don't know what our names are at the moment, so we can go find out.
You did it the normal way in the boards controller, though.
What's that?
Your implementation of index in the boards controller.
No, remember, I checked it out. Remember, I showed this already.
Oh.
I checked it out. I went and got Nathaniel's stuff, right? So it is what the normal way is. All right, so if I go in here, into the console, we look at our boards. Not boards, board. Our first name is my second list somehow. So I'll go back to our code. We can change the name to be my second list, and we should get back our second list. Nope, not. Get out of here, Chrome. All right, so we can see we actually get back our second list. Right now we can actually start to do stuff. So let's, we finally have this thing working. Let's walk through what this code is doing, why it's doing it, and then we'll start to actually use it to do some cool stuff. All right, so we've created a query function. We're using this async syntax. Async is just saying somewhere in my function, I'm going to have some promises that instead of writing that .then syntax, I want to use a wait. It just makes it much clearer what's happening, and it forces the JavaScript to actually stop and wait until that code is executed, as opposed to throwing it off and continuing the rest of the code execution and coming back to it later. It just goes one step at a time. So this works much more in line with what you probably are expecting. So it's going to run line 2, and then it's going to run line 4, and then line 5, and then line 6. And it's only going to move on from line 4 to line 5 after it gets the response from the server. Okay, and then it's only going to move from line 5 to line 6 after it's converted the response into JSON. Okay, if you do it, so just to make that more clear, the other way to do this is you don't use async here. Put fetch here. You do a .then, which is very similar. The response here, so that's the response we're getting back. And here, instead of doing data.await, we do .then. Okay. So what this is the exact same code. Okay, so it's saying I'm going to do what's on line 2, then I'm going to do my fetch. When the fetch eventually happens, I'm going to go into this then block, and I'm going to take my response, I'm going to convert it to JSON. When it converts, after it converts to JSON, I'm going to go into this then block, and then I'm going to log it out. Now the difference between those two pieces of code, though, is if I do a thing here like console.log hello, are we going to log out the data or hello first?
Hello first.
Yeah. Technically, we don't really know because it's kind of like a speed thing, but it's a far higher probability that we're going to spit out hello. If I go back to that await syntax and I put hello here, are we gonna print out hello or data first?
Data.
Data, because it actually follows the way that we want it to. This is brand new syntax. It's really only been around for like a year and a half or so.
But you don't have a wait. Do you have to have a wait on each line?
You have to have an await on anywhere that there would be a promise returned.
Okay.
So anywhere that you would have put a .then, you have to put an await. So in this case, right, we had a .then on at the end of fetch, and we had a .then on the end of JSON. So we put an await for wherever there's a dot, wherever we're waiting, where there's a promise return, it's called. So this returns a promise that eventually resolves, it's called. So we're going to wait until that promise resolves, which is to say we're going to wait until we actually get the response from the server. This response.json function also returns a promise, which is saying wait until I finish processing a string back into JSON, and then I'm going to resolve the result. So we're going to wait until it's all the way turned into JSON. And then after that, none of this, like console.log doesn't have a promise. It just happens immediately. The next one happens immediately. There's synchronous functions, it's called, as opposed to asynchronous that happen in parallel or not time-based. And so they don't need an await or a .then. Okay. All right. So this is the simplest version of what we're trying to do, which is we just want to do a query. We're going to do name. You can also pass in nothing, and you should get back all of the boards. You can't really pass in nothing though. You have to pass in an object, but now we should get back all of our boards. So there's 2 of them. And now we can say constant boards equals our query result. Let's wait for that. Actually, yeah, so it equals our query result. So now our boards variable, that's still pending. Why won't you let me do the await? Oh, because I'm not returning. Because I'm not inside of a function. So let's say set boards equals async. All right, so the one problem with this doesn't actually end up being a problem once you get into real serious JavaScript writing, because you're always also writing inside of a class, and so you always have functions, just like we did in Rails. We've been writing a lot of our JavaScript just raw, straight down the page. You can't just use async without having a function, so you have to have a function that you're calling to be able to run async. So we can do that, though, and do a wait inside of here. and then we can put our debugger, and now our boards should be.
Why do you have to use a wait on line 4, where you're just calling the field inside that? Or is that also?
On line 4, JSON, this function that comes from the response object that you get back from the fetch that we're doing, is a return to promise.
Oh, that
so
also.
It also returns a promise. Why?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Okay.
They totally could have not had it return a promise. They're a bunch of jerks, in my opinion. But yeah, but that's what it is. So now, nope, that's not the new code though. What the heck is going on? This is my. It's like caching, but it's caching. Where's the
Safari strikes.
Yep, they got me again. Safari caching. Preferences. What if I just hard reload? No, I can't hard refresh. All right. So what we've gotten into in Chrome, there's an issue like this too, and there's a button that you click to turn it off. Basically, it said, "Hey, I already got your JavaScript and your HTML as they are. I'm going to the same place to get them again. I'm going to assume they're the same because I don't want to have to go download it again. So it just caches what the code is. So we're in a position where we're stuck here.
How do you develop?
Yeah, it makes it very difficult to develop. There we go. All right, so now we have boards, and our boards, you can see, is an array of objects, right? So we're to where we really want to be. So from that point, I can treat boards just like I had written it in here, right? So I could have written constant boards equals an array name my second board created at, etc. And then created the second board. Right, so we understand now how to interact with this type of an array, right? One that I've just written inside of my code. So the only difference is that now instead of writing it in our code, we're retrieving it from an external source. Once we get it to this point, it's an array of objects, and I can use it like any other array of objects. So now I can loop over it, and I can put it into my items, so my to-do list items. I can do all the normal things that I would do with an array of objects. Does that make sense? So now you can take your code, like this is where we're starting to get pretty close. Right now, basically what you're going to do is you could take this query function that I have here, and you would replace where you have in your to-do list code for JavaScript, wherever you're creating your original list of items, you're going to start with this instead. And so all it's going to do is loop over your list of items, and it's going to create the HTML that you were already creating before. Okay. So you're storing your list somewhere else. All right. Then if we want to create a, let's say that we want to get a specific board. So instead of getting all of the boards, how might we get a specific board?
Do slash and the ID of the board.
Yeah. Let's just call this run, so we just have a function that we're doing. All right, so we can copy and paste this to get started. If I want to do a raw GET request or a find, if we look at the Rails syntax, how do I do that? What do I need to change here?
To do.
So I want to get a specific board. I want to get one. I want to get the board with the ID of 2.
Okay, but you don't want to use the slash. You want to do it in the query.
Well, no, just tell me how. I mean, we can do the slash. You just tell me what I need to change here to get that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Just replace the query string, all of that with /2.
Here or
Before
Before
no
the question
question mark. Yeah.
so we can do that. So we are no longer using this query string thing, right?
Mhm.
I'll walk through what that's doing in just a second. So we're not using our params anymore.
No.
So and then I'll just change this to be get, and it doesn't have any parameters, right? So I'll remove that. And it really should be a board now, not boards, right? So we get back. Is a single board. It's an object that has these values in it, right? And it has an ID of 2. So we got our second one back. If we look at that, I really don't like how they do that because it's not what it looks like in real life. But if I go to the console, we should see it printed out. So it looks like an object like that, right? Which is like our original object. Okay. So, what's that? What's that?
What is it?
I don't know. Safari is the worst. I'm sorry. I'll try to figure out what's going on with my browser. All right. So we can do it this way. But what if I want to change it and get the one with the ID of 1? I don't want to keep changing this function, right?
You can put an input to the function.
Yeah, so we can add a parameter, an argument to the function. We want to call it
ID.
Yeah, probably ID, right? Because that's what it is.
And then just interpolate that right there.
Yep. All right, so now we can say get 1 or get 2 or get whatever. Now we have the one with the ID of 1. Sorry for the horrible way that it shows it, but that's what it is. Okay, so that's how we do a get. So what is this get function in our controller? What is that actually hitting? What's the name of the function? The method.
Index. Oh wait. Yeah, that's actually right.
So we have index. So there's index, show,
That's show.
update, create, delete. This is show,
Yeah, that's
right? And so it takes the format to get there is a little different. So we have a /ID here, where in the index, when we're doing the query, we don't have a /ID. We just send up a bunch of query params. Okay. What's happening here? All this is doing is converting the curly brace object syntax that we use normally in JavaScript to parameter name equals value. Okay, so it's converting like before when we did right, we did priority equals 1000. It's converting that to does that make sense? Just because the syntax is different. When you make it a query parameter, you can't create a URL that has curly braces in it, colon. It doesn't have any way of understanding that. So we're just converting it to the syntax that it does expect. If there are multiple of these, so if you did that and then name is Kevin or something, then it will continue to convert it to say and Kevin and name equals Kevin. Right? You see how those two are equivalents? It's just that the query strings the syntax is different. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So that's all this is doing. You can read through that and kind of figure out what's going on with it. If you want. Okay. All right. So that's how we do a query. So this is index and a get. So this is show. What's the model? So when we do a get and we hit the show, what does the code look like on the Rails side? So what are we doing on the model? So what are we doing on board?
Board.find.
Board.find, right, with the ID.
Correct.
For query, what are we doing for the code on the Rails side of things?
It's board.find. Oh no, not board.where.
Board.where, and then whatever
and then just
parameters.
parameters.
Yeah, because again, so what happens, so here we're converting from the object format or the hash format into the query string format, and then when it gets to Rails for us converts it from the query string format back into an object format or a hash format. Okay, which is why you can just do model.where and then just pass in the parameters that come in. We don't have to do that conversion because they're doing it for us. JavaScript just isn't as nice and doing that for us when we go in the other direction. Which is why like we've built some functions on top of what JavaScript gives us because we want those nice things to just happen for us. We don't want to have to do it every time. All right, so that's the getting the query. So what if I want to create a new board?
Board dot. Oh wait. You
Here.
go into boards and it's what's the request? It's a post request.
It's a post request. Yep. So if I copy this, what are the things I need to change?
So you need to make fetch a post request. I don't know exactly that.
Yep. So let's go back and look at the documentation. There's all of our options. So what do we need to do?
You need to pass in the hash and method like post as it says there.
Yeah. So
post.
we needed to the second parameter is an object of options. One of the attributes is method. We need to change that to be post. Go back. That's what this is. Okay. What else do we need to change?
You need to pass in the body. Yeah, the body.
So we also need to pass in the body.
With the parameters.
There's going to be some parameters. Yeah, so what else? We're missing some other things.
Well, you're not here. You're just going to boards now. You're not the ID thing.
Yep.
Need to be there.
So you can just go to /boards.
That should get you everything, right? If you
Well,
the right
we have
parameters.
some like weird warnings happening here that might help.
Okay, well, you don't need an input to the function, and
We don't need an
the
input.
param should be the input. Yeah.
The param should be the input, right?
Yeah.
So this is the data that we're trying to pass in, right? So oftentimes I call this payload because it's the thing that's going in the body instead of the thing that's going into the GET request. It's just a way to help differentiate when you get all these functions showing up. But it's the same thing, right? It doesn't matter what we name it. All right, so if I want to create a board down here, what do I need to do?
You just need the name.
We just need a name.
Oh, the name, the order. What's another one? Also won't say.
Is there an order? I forget.
Yeah,
what
he added that, and he made it. He made it. You need that
Okay.
to save the actual.
Okay. Well, yeah, so, okay, if you need it, that's cool. So let's try to do it without it then, because we should get some errors, which are nice. So what do I want to... There's something else I need to change here, though. So what's going to happen if
Oh, you need to change its create.
Yeah, it
You
should be
call it
create. All right, so let's go check that out and see what happens. So what we get back as our response is order can't be blank. Right, so it actually tells us what the error is. So the REST controller does some really nice things for you behind the scenes. Probably looked at that a little bit where it does the .save and then it sends back the errors.full messages. So these are the errors.full messages. And that way you could use this if you wanted to, if it was a form that somebody was filling out, to give them back a validation message. But in our case, we just want to get it right now, so we need to. It's telling us, hey, we need to add an order. So let's just make it 55 or something. We're back stuck on the. Order can't be blank. It's not blank. You know what? I bet he should have not have named it order. I bet order is. Let's just try to do this with item instead. So I'm just going to move this. I bet order is a keyword, and it's mad about that. Because order is used in Rails Active Record to order the records, and so it's probably a keyword, and it's causing some problems. Let's just try. So we just switch everything to using items instead. Let's give that a shot. Get errors. We haven't created the Rails resource yet. The controller. Right, so right now we only have our boards controller. So let's just create another one for items. And then what else do we have to do to make our items controller work?
You have to add the methods.
What is it?
So the methods come from here, and we can go look, right, because they're already coming. They're already here. By the way, do you guys know how to do that? Did you see what I just did there? I jumped directly to that code. Do you know how to do that yet? Command click, yeah. So it takes you directly there, and then you can go look and see what that code actually has in it. So we already have all the methods, but
you have to
there's
make sure you have the roots.
the route, yeah. So we have to go make sure that the route exists. So if you go into config, there's a routes.rb somewhere.
It's under
There you
master
go.
key.
So right now we only have boards. We just have to add another one for items. And then I'm not 100% sure about this, but generally I restart whenever I add a new resource. Just to make sure. By the way, you're getting lots of output in this server to help you understand what the actual issues are. We do a pretty good job of giving you validation on the JavaScript side so you can actually see what's going on. But if you're ever not sure what's happening in the JavaScript, you can always come look here, and like you can see, you got basically the same error. It says there's a routing error. I couldn't find a post for items. So now if we give that a try, so board must exist,
And you need a board ID.
which just means, yeah, we need a board ID. So if we go back to fetch.js, and we know there's a board with an ID of 1, so let's just use that one. 422 unprocessable entity is what you get back. If we look at the network request, we can see that too. So if we go here, you can see you get your items, etc. And you see the status is 422 unprocessable entity. So that's something you can look out for. You can add to your code some additional code, which we'll get into later, that allows you to like catch errors like that, and then you can display it to the user. So you can either use it for displaying validation messages, or if it's a 500 error, so your server's just down, you can like put a pop-up up and say, hey, things are bad on our side, sorry about that, move them to a page, etc. All right, but if we go now and look, board still must exist because you hate me, empty cache. And then there's a board ID. Let's see what it's complaining about. Items controller. That should all be fine. Create as. Okay. For the moment, let's just go. The reason why we're getting that error is because our item has a dependency. Just gonna get rid of these validation things. We're just gonna get rid of that dependency on board, and then it should stop complaining. And at least we can actually do the create. There you go. So now we have an item. We get back what the ID was. So when you sent it up, we didn't send an ID. When it got put into the database, it got an ID. It also got a created at and an updated at. So you can use that information, and then you get back all that stuff. I guess we didn't do very much. We didn't do a very good job of creating, though, because we didn't use task name. We used name. So it's not very nice, but we can do task underscore name. And there's something broken. Did you see, like, we are doing the create, but somehow it's not recognizing task name as an actual attribute. So have to look at that. It's probably something in the gem. That seems pretty strange that that's not working, but it's not. All right, so we can do the same thing though that we're doing to create. We can do an update. So how do we do an update? So if I duplicate this, what do I need to change?
An update, you gotta put the ID. You gotta take it in ID as an input to the input document.
That's one way to do it. Imagine though the payload that we are going to send up most likely is going to have an ID in it because we pulled it down and now we're trying to modify it so it already has an ID. So what's another way that we could?
So you can do item/payload.id.
That's right.
Interpolate.
So that's just the easiest way because most likely, again, you did a query or something, you pulled down the list, you have the ID for it. Now you're just going to send that payload back with the modification that you made, which is probably to the task name, and then you're going to send it up. So it has an ID on it. So we can.
And it's a put method.
It's a put method instead of a post. Yeah, and that's it. So we just want to change this to be update, so it's something a little more readable. And then we want to add an ID to our payload so that it knows which one it should be doing this for. Yeah. And again, for some reason, we're not being particularly successful in actually doing anything, but it did give us back the correct one, so we're getting it back, but we're just not. Let's see. So if we go look at the Rails code, we should see that we're getting a put request. Oh, here we go. This is where we're getting into the course stuff. This might be what our whole problem is. So if I go to here and add times 200, it's all good.
Did you permit that? Actually, it does that naturally.
Yeah, it takes care of it in the active record stuff. That's true. I'm not worried about it. So I think what's happening here is you see this HTTP origin header. It's saying, hey, you're coming from a file : / domain, and I don't like that. I want you to be coming from HTTP : / localhost 3000 because that's where I am. And because we're not serving from the same URL that it's on, it's getting upset. Now, most of the time, and very quickly, we're going to see you're not serving the file from the computer, right? Like this is just a convenience that we've taken because a lot of the JavaScript stuff you can just write from there. As soon as we move into a stencil project, you won't have this issue anymore. It actually has a server that comes along with it, and so you actually serve it, and you get a localhost 8100, and then you can make the core stuff work. I think most likely what we're running into is overly sensitive security issues, where it's saying you can't do this from a file. And this is something I don't do very often because I don't ever really actually develop from a file like this. There's a couple of ways that you can get a server up and running, and you can research them. Like you can just say like JavaScript server simple or something. Browserify is one of them that will get you up and running pretty quick. But Gulp has a bunch of things that you can use to get the server running, etc. For now, we're just going to assume that that's what the problem is. This code all should be fine. You guys should be able to use it, and hopefully on Monday, either you will have figured it out by then, or I'll give you a solution. Or really Monday. So Monday we'll move into the stencil stuff. So we should be able to get past this pretty quickly. But that's what's happening there. So all right. So that's our update. And then if I want to change this to be, and then if I want to delete function, what does that look like?
Same thing minus. Oh, you just need the name, the ID. So your input's ID and then delete, and there's nothing else.
Yeah. We see the color difference though.
Oh, it's a taken word.
Yeah, it's a keyword for
So
JavaScript.
it's delete from JavaScript.
Yeah, you could say remove. So you never want to name things what they are from a code perspective. So like you never want to name something delete underscore function
Oh,
method.
you don't want to do that?
You never want to name something like array or object or those types of things because they're not useful to the reader. Like all you're telling them is what they can already see in the code, right? Like I know it's a function because there's a function there. So you always want to name things in a way that people can recognize them from like a normal day-to-day life perspective. It just makes it easier for everybody to come into. And it reduces words, so you don't then end up naming every variable that you have what the data object is. It's just not necessary because you can look and see what's going on, especially when you get the TypeScript. So just use remove as the alternative. So we already have / payload.id. Really, we should be changing this to ID, though, you said. Do that. And then the method should be what?
Delete.
And do we need a body? And so if we then call remove during our run block, what do I need to change the payload? What do I need to change this to?
Just ID, yes.
Yeah, so we just hit 1. And that gives us back our first one. So if we try to do that again, we get an error because it can't find one. There isn't one. We already deleted it. It's gone. Okay. So the delete's actually working the way that we expect it to. All right. Any questions about how this fetch stuff works, how to use it? I'm going to post this stuff. You guys can literally just copy and paste this and start using it in your code where it makes sense. What we're going to continue to work on through the weekend is now that you can set up the controller side and you have the Rails side of things set up, now if you can take this code and implement it with your JavaScript side, what I'd really like to be able to see on Monday is some examples of you guys actually getting the to-do list to work back and forth. You might run into some of the problems that we did with the create and update stuff. If you get past that, great. If not, it's no big deal. We'll get past it on Monday. On Monday, we're going to move into Stencil. We're going to replicate the things that you... So next week, the push is going to be to replicate what you've done with the to-do list, but now to do it for the bingo status board. But the way that we're going to do it is using Stencil instead of using raw JavaScript. And hopefully by that following Monday, we have a Stencil project that's ready to go. Each one of you is going to work on it individually, and we'll choose the best one to put up. And then what we'll do is, if there's something cool from the other projects, we'll have you guys take the cool things and put it into whatever the best one was. Does that make sense? And then the following week after that is when we'll get into, okay, let's have group projects. Let's actually start working on the syllabi thing, because you'll have all the pieces at that point. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So let me push this so you have access to it. I'll push both the Rails changes so this is a great, like the Rails app as it's set up right now is a very basic Rails app that gives you all the things that you want. So if you want to, you can even feel free to like copy it, like fork it, pull it down, copy it, whatever you want to do, and then just make your changes inside of there that you need to, right? Changing your models and your controllers and that type of thing. Or you can obviously just look at it and pull over the pieces that you want to. The nice thing about Git, right, if you're not as familiar with using GitLab, is that you can see the changes as change sets. So if you want to look at the differences between today and where we started, you can go to here, and you can see there's been 3 commits. So this is what Nathaniel added, right? You can actually see green means he added it. He added that order. He added a couple migrations. And then if you look at what I did today, you can see I added rat cores. We added an items controller. We removed some validation things. So you can see what's going on. Right, and then if I go into JS intro. So and then the same thing with the JS intro. You can go and you can just copy and paste those functions and move from there. It's really, I mean, all we really did, right, was make a slightly simplified version of what the fetch command does, and only slightly. Like there's really not much difference here. One of the things that you might want to do is for the moment, we'll talk about how to do this with classes and make it a little bit nicer next week. But for the moment, what you might want to do is add a endpoint or something. Now, in your case, because the to-do list is that's the only model that you interact with, you only have one controller, you might not need to do the endpoint. But you can imagine if you had a boards controller and an item controller and a such and such controller, you might want to switch them. And so this is a way that you can easily just swap between which one you're trying to interact with. Make sense? All right, so that's it for this. We are going to do leadership stuff today and do the treadway tire case. Don't look it up beforehand. But it's just it's a cool case study about teams and how to make decisions as teams in high risk scenarios. So.
Cool.
All right.
It's at 1:30, right?
1:30.